items not on the agenda. I do have one urgent item to be discussed, and that is there's a request for an update on the Mudtopia event. I did think this was coming rather soon, but however, it has been, we've seen that there have been a number of questions asked, so yes, that's going to be discussed, and I think we're going to do it immediately, so we can thank you. The reasons for that is it's not on the current agenda, and it may be discussed at this meeting. There's no resolution, decision or recommendation to be made as a result of that of the discussion to take place. So thank you. So we'll have that right now, and that's an update on the Mudtopia event that was held this weekend in Rotorua. Yes, Councillor Sturt.
I have an item of late business, but I would like that done in confidential. I'd like staff to give us an update on where we are at with the huge public interest and misinformation swirling around regarding the aquatic centre. I just wondered whether we could have an update from staff on where we're at, so that we can ask any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. There's a request for an update on the aquatic centre, and yes, we are aware there's been a lot of media attention focusing on that, and I know that we are receiving also some communication from some of the staff have been affected and other concerned citizens. So the request to have that update at this stage held in confidential, obviously because we've got staff issues and matters relating to staff, that it would be appropriate that be held in confidential. So we'll do that. Thank you, Jeff. So this is the update on Mudtopia. Thank you. Awesome feedback. Thank you. I'm happy that we are going to be having an update, but I just do need to ask at the outset, Henry, good afternoon. This was held only over the weekend, so would you have enough to satisfy perhaps some of the, well, a bit of a, is it going to be, I'm not going to say robust enough in terms of feedback, but will it suffice as feedback at this stage, or an update?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Look, yes, I think it will. I think it will give a good picture of what happened over the weekend. It won't necessarily give the answers on exactly what we do going forward and the full debrief, but what it does is give a real picture of what happened over the weekend and gives you a picture of the numbers around both attendance and the budget, which really is in the face of quite a lot of public interest about those things.
Thank you.
So what we'll do is just go quickly through this presentation. It's got a very short video up the front, really just to capture the mood of the weekend, and then we'll flick through to cover the coverage and also the metrics around the event.
Well, one thing's for sure, we had beautiful weather.
Yeah. Apologies for this.
Well, is there anything verbal in the meantime, Henry?
Yeah, I think I can take you through the verbal, and really it initially following that video is, I think that the overall conclusion probably from the weekend is that it was an untested concept, and I think a lot of us around this table and probably a lot of people out in the community were unsure about what it actually meant and how it would fit. And I think one of the things we really saw over the weekend was families in particular, and I think local families even more so, really embracing the concept. And it was actually quite phenomenal being there over a couple of days and just seeing almost the lack of or the complete inhibition really of people traipsing around covered in mud, wrestling, people they've never wrestled before, and just a very, very happy atmosphere. And something that's been really obvious in the last few days has been the incredibly positive media coverage. And actually the Daily Post, from the start, really from the Friday onwards, really almost embraced it, I think, in terms of pictures of celebration and pictures that I think present a totally unique look at what this festival was all about. And I think, again, as I said, no one really knew what it would be. When you look at the photos, you think, wow, people loved it. So it was fascinating in terms of that. And we got coverage on One News on the first night, which probably, in fairness, honed in on the cost issue, but certainly was good profile for the event leading into the weekend. And I think having the Friday focused with schools was also another really good entree into the weekend. So it's just a bit more of the coverage. And I'll flick on to Stuart to just take you through some of the key sort of stats from the weekend.
Kia ora koutou. Mudtopia, or if you went to the event, you're now called a Mudtopian. People through the gate. So there's 12,000 in total. So there was 1,000 on the Friday with all the secondary school students that came to play. And then Saturday about 5,000, and then on the Sunday 6, because obviously the word of mouth that got out around town that this was a really cool thing to do, and everybody rocked up. The concert goers, 2,000, that's less than we expected, and I'll cover that off a little bit later. So total visits was 14,000. We were originally aiming for around 10,000, so the numbers are really positive. The Spa and Wellbeing Pamper, this one was really surprising, was actually sold out. So people really got engaged with the wellness, with the massage and mud. The demographic pretty much was families during the day. A lot of Maori young families attended the event, which was great to see. And then the concert goers, pretty much the target market, that 18 to 35 years who had a ball. Wider impact, we know from our Ticketmaster regional stats where people came from, so around about 1,500 bed nights, that economic contribution of around 285,000, plus of course we don't know what any retail and food and beverage spend was. Key financial issues, so total revenue was 117,000, which was gate ticket sales, and some contribution from our share of on commissions from food and beverage and from the spa therapy unit. There was a shortfall of 460k for us. So there was a couple of things. Event timing, I think, pre-Christmas was an issue for us. Where families have got money already committed. Crate Day actually played quite a large role. So whilst many of us here may not know too much about Crate Day, if you're a university student, it's the day of the year almost. And then, of course, we were also up against the oversupply of concerts in the marketplace at this time of the year. And as I mentioned in my last briefing, a number of concerts like the Winery Tour, had been cancelled, and we saw things like SEAR on Grab One, and there was a poor turnout, I believe, for Dead Mouse 5, which was actually, we thought, was our biggest competition in Auckland. External funding received, so that's 907,000 we received in. The shortfall against budget was 80k. It was a bit unfortunate, and I think some of the earlier issues earlier in the year with the Boreong mud made people a little bit nervous. Sponsorship was really difficult to attract with an unknown event, so that was really hard work in trying to secure funding, but it was just really hard work. Preliminary financials, so the cost on the revised budget was 1.48 million. That was $200,000 less than the initial business case, so we were able to cull a bit of expense out some months ago when we were looking at the potential. Total revenue, which is from the Crown MB, NZCT contributions, sponsors and grants, was 1.06 million. Total cost council for the event was 437k. These are obviously preliminary results, so they might move up and down, but I'm not expecting them to move dramatically. This includes the one-off the portion of the startup costs, apportioned over the 5-year agreement that we have with MB and the Major Events Fund. Startup costs was 110k. These were to do with brand development, website development, marketing, creative content. There was also some shipping costs of the inflatables from Boreong, about 12k for that as well. So this was really just to give council an update on the success of Mudtopia. The 437k falls within the 500k envelope that was approved some time ago, and obviously the last time I updated you with ticket sales, we potentially, the worst case scenario we were looking back then was 575k. So it's come in, I guess, a bit more positive than where we thought we could have been, and obviously we'll be back with a full review to council early in 2018 for ongoing Mudtopia. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I know there'll be some questions, and I don't want to labour this one. It's been a good update, even if it has, and it's only in a few days since the event. So thank you very much for preparing that for us today. But I will take a few questions from councillors, because I'm sure there are a few. But I'm not going to spend too much time on this. So please, make it succinct. Yes, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Regarding the wider exposure, when you come back with the full wrap, will that include the likes of the Korean state broadcaster that was here as part of their delegation that was filming?
Yes, it will. There's a number of measurements that we have. I mean, we did have, there was a Korean delegation obviously here, but there was also another 15, 20 students that came in after them. So that was well supported. We also had 33 delegates from the Korean Association from the Waikato as well.
Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. I'd just like to know, of the 12,000 passes or whatever it was, if we only produced 117,000 in income, by my quick calculations, we only charged for about 1,500 passes. The rest were given away free?
I think that's probably correct. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I won't labour too long, other than to say that thanks to Jeff and the staff here that looked after our friends from Boreong, Korea. I went up to Auckland and came down with the delegation, and I stayed with them right through the whole event till they left to go back with their delegation of about 17 with a television crew and that with them. I can say that Mayor Kim thoroughly enjoyed it, and he said even though they've been going some 21 years now, they learned something from our one about and what they would like to get back to, and that's catering for the children and the families. And yes, I think we were blessed with the weather over the weekend. Great that there were a lot of other events in Rotorua, Touch and the parade and everything, but I think a very successful one. The first one was always going to be hard, as Deputy Mayor would know. Crankworks, which started off in their first time, was tough. 4 years later, they're making profit. I think it's going to be turned into a tremendous success for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gould and Mrs. Mohi.
Chair, thank you for your report. Am I right in saying that quite a number of people from throughout New Zealand attended the Mud Festival?
That's correct. There was around about 675 regionally attended the event. Oh, sorry, that's ticket sales. Some of those are family passes. So no, it's round about that 1,500 mark that Councillor Kent mentioned. Most of those were out-of-town visitors, and that equates to the bed nights as well.
Miss Mohi?
Oh, kia ora. Kia ora. I just wanted to acknowledge that you guys' efforts in the event. I know my grandchildren attended. They loved it. And yes, there were free passes were given, and I think that was quite a smart move actually, because you're getting bodies on mud, not on seats. But you know, it looked good. It looked like fun. My grandchildren had a ball, and I think it's going to just grow. So, ngā mihi, kia koutou.
Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I had the privilege of opening the, I couldn't go to the Mudtopia opening, I had the privilege of opening the 20th annual New Zealand Māori Aotearoa Touch Tournament over at Pūringa Park at 8 o'clock in the morning, and 3,500 participants along with Mudtopia, along with the Christmas parade. There were Rotorua, you drove down Fenton Street and the place was full to the max. And that's what it's all about. Hard to quantify in terms of economic development, but the place was humming. The town was busy. The eateries were all full on Saturday night. So I think, in looking at it with an overall view of things, this will grow like Crankworks, like the Tulip Festival. Remember when everyone laughed at us wanting to do a Tulip Festival? Now, look at it, it just runs itself. So I say, Madam Chair, all power and thank you to the staff for the work you've done, Stuart, and I think that onward and upward.
Thank you. Do you have a comment, Ramesh?
Madam Chair, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Henry and Stuart. I think it's wonderful for Rotorua, and probably with the first year, there's always going to be teething problems. So hence, having given away some free tickets or free passes to whatever value they were, I just hope that from the stuff that's mentioned as to why the ticket sales were poor this year, it's probably something that we can look at for next year, and also look at because if the word gets out that there were lots of free passes given, then the ones buying for next year might probably say, hey, look, shall we just hang on and wait? So we've got to sort of balance that, and if we can ledger that into the equation for next year, I think the longer this Mudtopia takes, the better it's probably going to get. Thank you.
Final question, Councillor Hunt.
It was really more a comment, having attended it and seeing the number of people walking down the street covered in mud. I tried to go back again on the Sunday, and you're right, Councillor Stewart, the town was full, there was no parking. And I think for me, the comments that got fed back to me was it was so much about families, and there were families of all sizes and descriptions and ages, and that this is one of the events that we're putting on for our own residents. And yes, other people will turn up to it. For a first off, I think this was tremendously successful, and yes, the weather played a part, but actually so did everyone's willingness to do something, to play old-fashioned fun. Is what it was termed, old-fashioned fun, just getting out, getting muddy, throwing stuff at your friends and hooning around a bit in a safe environment. So well done, full credit to everyone. I look forward to the ongoing progress next year.
Thank you very much. Can I just make an observation? I do believe that the timing of any event such as this, particularly for a first one, we need to be spot on about it. You know, I hear about other events taking place and Crate Day and concerts in the area or in the region, but you know, the majority of people who might take part, apart from our own families, would be the people that come into town over the Christmas, New Year holiday period. So, yeah, I think you might need to look at that. The question that I'd like to ask is that we have obviously had substantial funding from MB, and so any other reporting requirements for them to continue with the partnership that we've got with them?
Yes, so we need to report back to MB in late January with a full report on the event. So
Right.
yeah.
Other than that, look,
Yeah.
thank you very much. No, Councillor Donaldson, unless it's something that you absolutely must, I'd like to move on. Thank you.
Thank you for your indulgence, Madam Chair. Just the concert, which was R18, and how did the ticket sales go against expectation? And is there a learning from whether that aspect of it fits with the family attraction that the event saw?
Ticket sales to the Shapeshifter Peking Duck concert were around about 1,000 tickets. So they were below what we expected. There is a lot of competition for that, that music concert space. And that's something definitely we should be looking at next time. Some of our initial thoughts in the download on Monday was whether we wanted to compete in that space in the future or whether we should just let that go and concentrate on the mud part of the festival. Yeah. I think the other thing also to remember that first time up event, this event costs around about the same as Lakeside does each year. So, and of course we've got the future potential of commercialising. So I think it's something we'll look at when we come back in early next year.
Thank you. And a big thank you to all those involved in the setup and the takedown of everything there, because it would have been a big job. And we were hit with some adverse media comment earlier on, but I think it was very, very worthwhile. So thank you very much. Thank you for that feedback. So we'll move on to our agenda. Confirmation of our minutes. The minutes of the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meeting held on the 9th of November 2017. May I have a mover and a seconder, please, for those minutes, that they are true and correct. Thank you, Councillor Gould. Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Are there any amendments, changes? Nothing? I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Thank you. Staff reports, and we do have quite a number of these, so I want to make sure that we all have sufficient time to ask any questions relating to the reports. So I would ask, please, that you focus your questions and make them succinct so that we can get through the afternoon. Excuse me. So yes, some of them actually are pretty, we should be able to get through pretty smartly. Recommendation 2, the schedule of meetings from the 1st of January 2018 to the 31st of December 2018. May I have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Move Councillor Stewart, seconded Councillor Tapsell, that we receive this report. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Thank you. Yes, we do have, yes, it's a loose one there, and I understand that other copies would be available if people want to get them, what do you call it? Laminated. Laminated, thank you, yes. It's quite straightforward, I think. Is there anything that, if you'd like to ask any questions about it, I think you can see clearly there that everything is marked as it is per usual. So no, so thank you very much. So now I'm going to just have a quick look. Yes, I'll put those, it is just one. I'll put one and I'll just move that. That the committee recommends that Council resolves to adopt the schedule of meetings for the period the 1st of January 2018 to the 31st of December 2018 based on a monthly cycle, and that the following starting times are agreed to. The Operations and Monitoring Committee meetings shall commence at 9:30 a.m, that the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meetings shall commence at 9:30 a.m, that the Council meetings shall commence at 9:30 a.m, that extraordinary meetings may be scheduled as required. May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Thank you, Councillor Bentley. It's been moved and seconded. I'll just put that motion then. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you. Carried. Recommendation 3, the Local Government Remuneration Review. May I have a mover and a seconder, please, to receive that report? Thank you, Councillor Bentley. Thank you, Councillor Hunt. That the report Local Government Remuneration Review be received. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you. Are there any questions for discussion on that report? Ms Mohi?
Kia ora, Madam Chair. I just have a couple of, concerns around the report. Note there's very little reference to, there is a reference to the community board members, which I think is great, and they're not part of that remuneration process, and that's fine. But there's a very blank space where no mention at all of Te Tato, and even as an overarching statement as the role that they play within council. I understand it's outside of the local government remuneration process. I understand all of that. I think it's just having an umbrella statement noting that we exist, because according to this we don't, which I find is a little bit disappointing. It actually flows through this whole agenda. So as it comes up, I'll point it out. But what I am, what I am looking forward to is the new Kaiwhakahaere Māori General Manager, who will, I hope, have a significant influence on some of the internal mindsets in this council. We don't appear in a number of these documents. I'm jumping the gun a little, but I'm talking about in the Merrill Forum, I think it was a Business After 5, in the weekend, our chair was asked to accompany the mayor. There was some statements made about the Rotorua and how great this council is for doing that, but no mention of Te Tato at all, that being a Te Tato process. And I think there is I think there's just a need to be a little bit more transparent around the role of Te Tato in council and some of these documents, the reports we get from staff, even just if they're umbrella statements noting that we exist, because right now it's actually quite, it's quite offensive in my opinion. So I'm just wanting to make that statement, and I'd like it to be minuted. Thank you.
This report is around the remuneration for elected members of the council, and obviously in relation to the Local Government Act. Yes, thank you. And so, if it's relevant, yes, I would understand if there was exception taken. I don't believe the comments that you've just made in relation to this report are relevant. So that would be a view that I would take on your views, on your comments. But I'm happy thank you for making them. Thank you for making them. But we're well aware that Te Tato is around the table. So I just feel that, yes, I think, I think we're feeling our way. Perhaps let me put it like that. We're feeling our way, and we don't want to upset anybody, and we're very appreciative of the and of the very valuable contribution that is coming to the table now from Te Tato members, without doubt. So if we can do better, then that's fine. But I do think it also has to be relevant as well. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Mohi.
I do have one more point. So there is a suggestion that because of the significant time our chair spends accompanying the mayor on some of the events that she's involved with, and he's asked to specifically accompany her, that some consideration be given to remuneration for our chair and those processes. So I'll just table that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's something that really should be taken up, actually, with our administration, because I don't believe anybody certainly should be out of pocket. And also, I think if there is any statements and I'm talking about media releases that are made, and Te Tato, and particularly the chair of Te Tato, has been involved in terms of accompanying or indeed presenting, because Te Tato is in a partnership relationship, then that needs to be inclusive of Te Tato and should actually be run by them at the same time, just to ensure that it is correct and it is acknowledgement is given where acknowledgement is due. So thank you for that. I don't know if you'd care to comment at all, Jeff? Thank you. All right. Thank you. There are a few councillors that want to express a view. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In answer to that last issue, I would just like to point out that Council is actually paying the Te Tato board, so perhaps that needs to be taken into consideration as well, but that wasn't my point. My point is we still seem to be trapped in this idea of remuneration should be based on council size. I find that totally archaic and ridiculous. It makes no difference whatsoever how big your council is as to how much work is involved from councillors and other elected officials. If you've got a large constituency or a small constituency, you're still working hard.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Gould.
Chair, page 23 has got looking at electronic spend by EPOS. Am I right in saying that it doesn't cover internet sales? Because we have Rotorua companies which sell a lot of goods on the internet, and we also have a huge number of Rotorua people who buy product on the internet.
What was that in relation to? Sorry, I didn't quite get that one, but I suppose you know what you were...
I can answer that one. I know what Mark's, Councillor Gould is referring to. So, as part of the criteria that the Remuneration Authority is looking at putting forward in terms of how they believe council sizing is worked out, we have added, there was through discussion and it's come up on it in a number of forums, that the addition of FPOS sales may be a good indicator instead of or on top of visitor nights, and I believe it was something that Deputy Dave led the discussion on, and just looking to him to see whether he would like to elaborate on that more.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. So can I start by saying all elected members and board members had an opportunity to attend workshops and have input into the webinar and the draft of this that went out to everybody to have further input into. And so I hope everyone's views are encapsulated in the submission we're putting forward. So the Remuneration Review Committee were struggling with how they measured guest nights and how relevant that was to smaller councils who didn't have a lot of commentation but had a lot of visitation. And an example would be Matamata Piako, who have a whole lot of people venturing through their rohi in camper vans, etc., simply because of the attraction of Hobbiton, and Waitoma is the same with the caves, etc. And so they all create issues for local government, but they don't have the accommodation that can, I guess, reflect that workload through bed nights per se. And so it was pointed out that Destination Rotorua, for a more reliable view of tourist visitation to your area, now rely on electronic card spend as a much more reliable way of measuring that flow through of visitors to and the loads they're placing on infrastructure, rubbish bins, roads, toilets, so on. Yep.
Mr. Berriman Kemp.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just firstly, just to talk with Gina's comments as well, but also to pick up on the point that Councillor Kent made, I actually think that it is an opportunity, due to the fact that this is a public document and the public pack. What this does is outline the process and the review for councillors and for community board members, but I would have thought a member of the public would want to know, so how are Te Tato board members remunerated? So a simple statement in there outlining that Te Tato is remunerated as per the partnership agreement it has with council addresses a couple of things. So I guess that there's ways and means that we can address that, but it's probably more that bigger picture view that we're wanting to emphasise here.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Sturt.
I don't think any offence should be taken in terms of no reference to Te Tātou in this document, because in all other public documents that go to print, there is considerable acknowledgement of the existence of Te Tātou, the reasons for its existence, why council created it as a result of iwi representations. Maybe in the commentary, where I would agree with Mrs. Moy and Mr. Berriman Kemp, maybe in the commentary on page 22 there should be an acknowledgement that as part of the democratic process that we provide here in Rotorua, unlike anywhere else, maybe a paragraph or mention in there could be sufficient. I think it is important that it is a different thing in Rotorua, as is Environment Bay of Plenty, with having separate Māori seats that look after that constituency. But in terms of the general thrust of the report, I totally support what has been brought together, and I think this will be well received.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Can I just say, I just want to comment on the remark from Councillor Kent around Te Tātou. Te Tātou actually pay their own way. We make a contribution, but believe me, they do as well, in terms of their own budget, or a budget, and they make their own contribution to that. And I know the work over and above currently that the chair of Te Tātou is actually putting in to assist this council. I'd hate to think if they were ever to submit a bill for their chair's contribution thus far, we'd be squealing. So I just would like to say that, you know, fair's fair, and we just have to remember that. You know, please, thank you. And also be respectful of our partner too.
Indeed.
So thank you very much. Now we've received that report. It's been, oh sorry, Councillor Donaldson, beg your pardon.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I was just really answering Una's question earlier, but look, I took Gina's comment and take it on the chin, and I think it's healthy and they should feel safe in being able to make those comments around the committee table. So I think we need to learn from that, and when I look at page 4, with the setup of the committee and its delegations for this committee and O&M, it states there, and maybe we could make it more obvious, is the membership of this committee and those who contribute to the decision making. And the point raised by Mr. Berriman Kemp regarding remuneration for Te Tātou, how they are paid, I think the place for that is in the annual report, where it shows how we're all remunerated, and fair comment, but I think that's the place for it, rather than this document, which does have a pretty narrow focus in just the local government remuneration of the Pākehā elected members, or the general, should I say, general elected members of this. Sorry, Madam Chair, no offence intended.
Goodness gracious.
Yep. So those are my thoughts, and I won't move this because it makes specific reference to the Deputy Mayor, not that I'll be in the role forever, but I'll probably leave it to someone else to move it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I just wanted to comment about Mrs. Mohi's comments there, and I support them. And I know this is about remuneration and it's a submission for all councils. However, we have put in a preamble about Rotorua and stating very proudly how we're different to other councils, and we're very proud of our relationship with Te Tātou, and actually attending their swearing in, I guess, on the marae was one of the proudest moments I've had as a citizen of Rotorua. So I think we could easily add the information around Te Tātou into that preamble if that was possible. That's what I'd like to see.
Thank you. Well, I think there's obviously opportunities for us to do better in this regard, and we look forward to working with our new staff member. I'm not sure when she comes on board permanent.
It's a day a week now.
Oh, well, coming on board permanently in the new year. Thank you. So that's good. So thank you. Now, could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Thank you, Councillor Bentley. That the committee recommends to Council to adopt the submission to the Remuneration Authority, Local Government, Remuneration Review 2017, Attachment 1. So it's been moved by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Bentley. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried. Excuse me. Recommendation 4. Thank you. Business case for Rotorua, Reorua, bilingual Rotorua. That the report, business case for Rotorua, Reorua, bilingual Rotorua be received. May I have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Gould. Thank you, Councillor Hunt. It's been moved and seconded. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please, that the report be received. Thank you. Contrary, thank you. And good afternoon, Te Taru, and kia ora.
Kerry Ann Hancock.
Oh, tēnā koe, Kerry Ann. No mai, hara mai kōrua.
Kia ora no tātou, te hea mana o te komiti nei, koutou mā. Hui mai nei tēnei rā, kei te miha tu ki a koutou. Kia kōrua, ngā hoa o tātou, tēnā kōrua, e mihi ana kia koutou. Thank you, Madam Chair. With the preceding discussions, I'm sort of caught a little bit out of breath, but never mind. Hoi anō, there will be no bill forthcoming for this particular moment. But I'm proud to submit, on behalf of tātou and in partnership with the Council, Rotorua Reorua business case. And why I'm proud to do that, because it's a big message and a big moment for not only tātou, but hopefully this community and this council as we move forward to normalise the use of te reo in our community over a period of time. Since the launch in August, we've been heartened by the momentum that's been created out there, but having said that, we didn't want to get caught in the excitement without actually making sure we planned this well. Because it's got to be resilient and it's got to endure. We have to understand the cost, risks, the opportunities and the values that this create. So what we did post the August meeting was we had a couple of wānanga amongst tā tātou, and a couple of the council members were involved, and also the Ministry of Māori Development Te Puni Kōkiri. And we wanted to shape what a business case might look like for Rotorua Reorua. As well as that, we wanted to identify the resources necessary to make this thing drive, because I understand council members, some had concerns about the costs, and rightly so. We had to identify where those were going to come from. And as you'll see in the plan here, in the business case, Te Puni Kōkiri have come on board in a significant way. And in working with council, we believe that over the next 6 months in particular, we can put a lot of effort and focus by putting point of contact on the ground to really mobilise the effort and to really begin to pull parties together and get interested parties through the door. I have to say that we've had everybody from the fire brigade, the police, hotels, cafeterias knocking on our door, wanting to do Rotorua Reorua in their businesses. But we want to make sure, as I said before, that this is done properly. It's not just about translations, it's about positioning of words, it's about how each one speaks to each other and how that message is translated in a bilingual sense. And what we've done in conversations or consultation with Te Puni Kōkiri, they agreed to finance a person to do and pull this business case together, and it's Kerry Ann Hancock. Kerry Ann came highly recommended to us, not only from her work within Te Arawa, but also work with Te Puni Kōkiri as an analyst, as a person who can pull together these types of documents. So you have before you quite a comprehensive document, I believe, on the business case for Rotorua Reorua. You have the covering paper that was presented by Michael Hancock, who's he's sitting up there in the audience. But I understand that Jeff will answer any questions from a council perspective today, because John Paul is over in Tauranga. So on that note, I'm going to ask Kerry Ann Hancock if she would give a summary of the business case, and then we can take any questions, Madam Chair. Kia ora.
Thank you.
Kia ora rā tātou. So I'll just take you through the thinking, and I know you guys have had a big day, so I'll keep it nice and sharp for you all. So what we did when we put together this business case is we took all the amazing whakaaro that came through all the wānanga that Te Tau had and put some evidence behind it. So we looked at some local and some international examples of where, bilingual examples, and the ones we focused on were Galway and Te Wairoa. And through those examples, we were able to pull together some evidence, I guess, that showed the potential economic uplift for Rotorua and to help us meet our goals, not only the 2030 vision, but our goals in terms of increasing our visitor expenditure. And we also looked at the benefits to our reo rangatira, to te reo Māori. We know anecdotally, I guess, that increasing use of te reo Māori within our community is going to absolutely have a positive effect in revitalisation, but we put some evidence behind that. So that's all there in that huge document. So if you look to the one pager that I've put together, that kind of has a lovely little summary for you, so you don't have to read all the millions of words. We've taken that evidence, we've looked at those case studies, and we've come up with a two-phase plan to get this happening for Rotorua. The first plan is really about, the first phase is really about trying to get some wins on the board and increasing the visual impact and the exposure of Rotorua Reo within our community, and doing it in a way that really draws upon our current resources within the city and our strengths and what central government have already done, and really putting it together in a nice quick package where people, as they enter Rotorua, can really feel Rotorua Reo. So some examples of that there you'll see in the one pager. We've suggested setting up a bit of a digital hub, a one-stop shop for anybody who wants to go Reorua, any business, any community group. So there's some ways that we can help people to do that immediately by bringing together those resources we already have through Te Puni Kōkiri Te Taurawhiri, which is the Māori Language Commission. And establishing Te Tau as the point of contact there as well, I think is important, just for consistency when people come looking for information, that there's consistency there for them. We're proposing in the first phase plan to do things such as creation of bilingual signage coming into our city, so those people who are arriving into our wonderful city immediately feel that they are being welcomed and they see that we're Rotorua Reorua. We also propose as part of the 90-day plan to do some Reorua zones, so I'm really excited about this, especially for my tamariki, putting together some playgrounds or some reserve areas that are Reo Māori anake, where they can go and just anyone can really experience te reo Māori and that they can go there and feel that te reo is normalised in these places. Some other things there is working with the council to help establish the Reorua policy, just so it's nice and consistency within council operations. And one that's already underway is, in the works I understand, is to help bridge the gap for those who want to learn te reo Māori. There's a bit of a gap in terms of providing free access to reo classes. So the council and Toi Oho Mai are already working together to try and put some classes together for those who wish to learn te reo Māori. Ka pai. Shall I continue to the next phase of the plan? Or is there? Yeah.
Aye.
Ka pai. So the next phase is really about fully understanding the needs of our community. We are made up, we've got multiple stakeholders, we've got Tarawa, we've got public domains, we've got our councils, DHBs, education, community groups, our NGOs, school clubs, or sports clubs, sorry. We've got our rangatahi, which in my opinion is where all the cool ideas and the great stuff comes from, and the business community. And we thought about how can we really understand what Rotorua Reorua means to all these different stakeholders, and how can we really, one, understand what Reorua might mean to them, what their aspirations are for their business or their sports club, and what barriers are there for those different stakeholders to achieving what they need for Rotorua Reorua. And then that would inform a more robust action plan, I guess, around how do we enable, empower our community to really create a sustainable Rotorua reo rua. So that's what this first phase is about, getting some quick wins on the board. Second phase is about really engaging and empowering our community to do this together. It's not just Te Arawa, it's not just the council, it's all of us. So, yeah, so that's that there. And then resources. You'll see there's a green table there that talks about the different contributions. Te Puni Kōkiri, as Te Taru has mentioned, has come to the party a bit, and quite a bit actually. They've been very good in helping. They've pledged $80,000 and through to the end of 30 June to help us get this underway. And that would appoint a project manager and start to really get some of those quick wins on the board, as well as setting up for the phase 2. The council contribution, through working with your staff, we're proposing that, the staff draft the Reo Māori policy in consultation with Te Tatau, the creation of the bilingual signage at the city entrances, which is beautifully aligned with the 2030 vision and the actions that come out of that, the creation of Te Reo Māori zones, and helping promote through all the existing communications materials the work that's been done around Rotorua reo rua. So people are really, it's made really visible within our community what's going on. And then Te Tatau's contribution is through the support and policy development, the creation of a digital hub on Te Tatau's website, the coordination of bilingual business and other awards is a way to incentivise our business communities to really get on board. And then promotion of Rotorua reo rua activities within the existing publications and comms materials, as well as, of course, the facilitation and thought leadership that Te Tatau provides. So just in terms of timings, I guess, just to finish off, we're hoping both those work plans together would be in a position to launch a strategy ahead, or basically a year after the launch of Rotorua reo rua. So it's a nice tidy synergy there for yourselves, for the council.
I'll just make one final comment, Madam Chair, if I may. Te Puni Kōkiri, the Ministry of Māori Development, see this as a major pilot for them, and which is something that they'd like to copy and host around the country. So this is the first for them in this type of space. So not only are they coming to the party in terms of employing Kerry Ann to do this particular case study, but also to apply some resources for the next 6 months, but work with us on our resource needs beyond that space. But we'd also be looking at that full-time person actually focusing in on developing the resources required to carry our strategy through over the next 3 years. Because the target is to normalise bilingualism in Rotorua over the next 3 years.
Thank you. And if you can't do it in Rotorua, where can we do it?
That's right.
Well, thank you very much. And I can clearly understand why Te Puni Kōkiri do want to, they see this as a first. It is a first for New Zealand. I have to say, Te Taru, you wouldn't get this out of Wellington. From our experience, your experience, my experience, you just wouldn't get this sort of document out of Wellington, or certainly not. I don't think so, because it truly reflects what a community would want, would need. But this is a first for New Zealand, and it's just to be commended. So thank you for the mahi that's gone into this. I know that there will be some questions, so I'll take some questions. Thank you very much for your presentation. Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for the report this afternoon. Was phase 1 and phase 2 definitely possible to be completed by August 2018 at a cost somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000? Is that correct?
Yes, we'll be applying that full-time position to actually focus in on developing it, doing all the work required to get to August, get the strategy up, and have the facilities to carry it forward. So basically making sure that the resources are in place to do it. Absolutely, we'll hit August, yep. That's the target.
Thank you.
Councillor Hunt.
Through you, Madam Chair. I'm particularly interested in the phase 1 and the Te Reo Māori zones. My daughter's up in Whangarei, and they have a Te Reo cafe that runs once a week, sort of 6 to 8, and whether I'd love to be able to order it long black in a cafe and those sorts of things, and whether that's one cafe does that. Have you considered the possibility of having that, or even rotating the materials on, a whiteboard with how to order your favourite coffee or tea, and see whether there are cafes around who are interested in having that? Because I think it would be something that both locals and tourists, if they happen to be in town there, would actually enjoy hearing it spoken.
Absolutely. I mean, we'll be looking at all sorts of creative ways to create those types of zones. You're not talking buildings, you're talking space. And so when you enter a space, happy to speak the reo. And people are knowledgeable. It doesn't matter about your degree of reo. As long as you enter that space, it might be just say, kia ora koutou, pihana koe. Just something simple as that, and you walk out of the zone again. The access to free language and free reo is actually a really good one. Toi Oho Mai came forward with that idea. How do they, because in line with Bilingual Rotorua, can they provide support services for people who want to? Like, for example, Third Place Cafe said a lot of our staff would like to be able to speak te reo, even just in a customer way, simple phrases, and so this is an opportunity for them to plug into this type of scenario, a couple of night classes a week for a period of time, at free access for them, and that's part of the opportunity that we're presenting.
Councillor Stewart?
I think this is an absolute must. I think this is going to open up all sorts of opportunities. I think we need to support this, to embrace the concept. I want to be the first real estate agent in Rotorua to have a bilingual advert, but I want to be able to know that I do it properly in the right context without, taking into account what I say in English may be totally different in Māori and in a different context. So I want to get those messages correct.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. They'll be making a track to your door, I'm sure.
Councillor Donaldson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Along the same lines, just looking at phase one, and I hark back to your first action, really, is establishing Te Tātou as the single point of contact for Rotorua inquiries. So harking back to the last ONM, where the CCOs all presented and got a fair old grilling on this issue from Potawa, I have to say, they're all very keen to embrace, like the businesses, as you acknowledge, that have been beating a path to your door. Would you rather the CCOs, and I'm thinking in particular the airport as an entranceway, who are about to embark on some rebuild and some signage and redevelopment, approach Te Tātou or through council channels, or would they come direct to you, the CCOs, if they want advice on how to roll out phase one?
I think ultimately, and Kiri, and you can comment on this, I'll just say something while it's on my mind. Ultimately, obviously, the rapport with council is really important. When it comes to the Rotorua and application of Rotorua, we see, Tātou is providing that opportunity to coordinate inquiries, to coordinate any levels of capacity building that may be required. We want to be supportive. We don't want to be, when we're talking about beating a path to someone's door, we don't want to be beating people up over this. This is actually about a way of drawing them in, where they see value, where they see this as part of a growing community, and are excited to participate because it adds value. So I think from the CCO's point of view, Tātou would be a first port of call in terms of any matters relating to bilingualism and its application. And when we have someone full-time on board, they will be able to handle that. At the moment, we don't have anybody full-time, and it's rather a strain to try and pull all sorts of threads together. Hence, we've been working closely as well with council staff to make sure that we're singing the same tune, because often people come straight to council, and as long as the left and the right hand are knowing what they're doing, we can work. But if we have a single point of coordination in the future, then there's a much tighter reference point.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And that's the answer. I was trying to get how we work together on this, and so that we're not crossing lines we shouldn't. And yeah.
I do have a question, and I'm not sure about the role of Mātāwai. Have they got a role with this new government, and will they be I'd be very interested, actually.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure what roles they'll have with the new government. They'd had a role with the old government, but,
Yeah.
but the new one, we would be working with Matawai, we'd be working with Tautawhiti.
Aye.
I mean, I think the person we're going to appoint will be working with all those points of contacts and look at how they may contribute to this and how we might provide value for them, because it's all a reciprocal process, Madam Chair, and definitely be working with them.
And I do know that Te Tautawhiti, they're pretty supportive of providing either resources or the opportunity to develop resources. Te Tautawhiti.
At the National FOMA conference that was recently held in Rotorua, both the Mayor and I launched the invitation and launched the initial introduction, where we stood together as partners in the context of the Council and Tātou. And part of that whole, presentation was about Rotorua Reo Rua as a single example of a project moving forward. The chair of Tautawhiti was there and actually offered some pretty strong accolades for us as being a pilot in that space. So, we're getting attention, and we want to get attention for the right reasons, and we want to be well organised in order to pay, homage to that type of accolade.
That's true. Councillor Bentley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a query. Unfortunately, I understand more Fijian than I do Te Reo, and when folks do presentations for us and they start off with 1 or 2 minutes of Te Reo, I have got no idea what they're saying, and I just, as a request, is that out of maybe common decency, you have an interpretation there so that everybody understands what you're saying, not the half dozen Te Reo speakers that are in the room.
Kia ora, Bulawanaka, Councillor. I think, one of the things that there's moments when you can do that. There are customary moments when you can't, where for tikanga or cultural resonance, for those times you can't do that, and that's just a cultural issue. But I think there are times when they break the space, they can translate. So it depends on the leader at the time, the issue at the time, and whether or not they're prepared to break out and speak te reo. When you are actually in a pōhiri, for example, where major parties are coming in, it'll be done in te reo, and then what happens is that they'll say a prayer, and they'll open a conversation up for translations and for anyone else to speak. So it more is a customary issue, but it depends also, Councillor, on the official nature of the business. I mean, there are times when people will just simply interpret for you. I mean, there are a lot of meetings that I go to that I would interpret straight after I've actually said in Māori what I wanted to say. So, it does happen, but other times it just simply can't happen because of custom.
Thank you, and I do think it's also the prerogative of the speaker as well, the person who's actually speaking. I know that my late husband, Theo, would never translate. It just, he was an age where, and he comes from an age and a teaching that was, and if you were disadvantaged because you were monolingual or monolingual New Zealander, that was unfortunate, but he would never have consented to translate. And it was an age thing and an upbringing thing as well. So, but some speakers may today do that.
Well, Madam Chair, just as a note with the late passing of Pihopa Kingi, the Ngāti Whakaui chief that just passed away recently, he was well known to speak Māori and then translated immediately after. So it depends on the personality and the character as well, and I suppose the relative ranking, whether or not they can get away with it.
Thank you. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you. Have you, in your studies, got any feel for how long it's likely to take to actually transition to all public signage in the city actually being in Te Reo as well?
No. I think it's just a really new whakaaro, and looking at Galway, which is probably the closest to what we have here in Rotorua, they, just as an indicator, they started in 1987 and they're still working to really perfect it. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, unfortunately. Ka pai.
So it'll be small steps, but hopefully progressive steps, Council. And the thing about Ireland as well, they're all Irish. so speaking the reo and getting the reo back is something that they all tune into quite nicely. Here, there's a mix, so we have to work a lot harder to get into that space.
Councillor Gould.
Chair, I'm happy to move recommendation 4, number 2, and it's a case of Rotorua needs to go forward, and this is a very good way of doing something which is unique for other councils around New Zealand.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gould. Thank you, Councillor Hunt. I just want to ask Jeff. Jeff, I presume you're happy with what you've seen, and I just want to ask for a comment. We're the beneficiaries of this.
Through you, Madam Chair. Look, I think it is. From a staff point of view, one of the things that I can say is that we're very much on a learning curve on this as much as anyone else. And I think what we're starting, though, to recognise is that when we're dealing with iwi, one of the things that we commonly forget with regards to translation is that translation can happen two ways. In other words, the need sometimes to engage authentically in Te Reo Māori is actually the default as opposed to the reverse being the case. And at times I think within our organisation the ability to communicate and to agree matters which are sometimes quite challenging and difficult can be eased through the greater use of Te Reo Māori internally in our organisation. And that's something that we're striving towards. This initiative for us, you haven't asked the question, I notice, with respect to cost and what does this actually mean. And I think that's something that we've been carefully looking at ourselves. The answer, I suspect, to public signage is going to be driven by the need for when the signage gets replaced. Because a lot of our signage won't be just automatically replaced, it will be replaced when it's actually due to be replaced, and at that time it will be replaced with appropriate signage which reflects the new policy. So to that end, this is not something that's added into the organisation. It's something that we should be doing as part of our core business of the organisation. So that's how we see the whole initiative actually rolling out. But I think, as you've probably seen already in Rotorua Lakes Council, there has been a significant movement with regards to staff with noho marae, staff attending Te Reo Māori lessons. And what we see is that that's actually adding significant value back to the organisation itself as well.
Thank you. We've had enough discussion on this, so I'm going to now put that the recommendation that the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee endorses the business case and proposed work plan for progressing Rotorua bilingual Rotorua, Reorua, bilingual Rotorua alongside key stakeholders and the wider community. It has been moved and seconded. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried. No, this. I'll just take some advice, but I don't believe so. I think this was a business case. There is no conflict. But thank you very much. But excuse me then. Perhaps you didn't get the opportunity to vote. I mean, I did put the motion, and you did. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you both for that. 61. Recommendation 5. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, to receive the report, Adopt Significance and Engagement Policy 2017 be received? Thank you, Mrs. Trumper. Thank you, Councillor Bentley. I'll put that motion. All those in favour that we receive the report, please say aye. Contrary. Thank you. Carried. Now, Una, you're going to review the report, or is it? Thank you.
Good afternoon, members. I think it is all there in the report. It's just to say that we currently do have a significance and engagement policy in the lead up to the long-term plan. There are a number of policies that we are required to review, and this is one of them. As stated in the report, there has been no change to the purpose or the intent of the policy. All this paper has looked to do is to hopefully make the assessment of significance a little bit easier for those staff that need to work through the policy. The feedback I've had from staff over the last couple of years is that the current criteria in its wordy form was a little bit difficult to navigate, and so hopefully the setting out of the policy in this format makes that a little bit easier to navigate through, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Essentially, it remains pretty much unchanged. Thank you. There are some changes there. Thank you. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to question the fact that under the old significance policy, transactions in excess of $3 million were considered significant. Under this policy, it's over $7 million. Why?
It was changed last year. Right, so... Yes, I think last time it was 10. I think it was reduced, wasn't it? Or am I? No, better take some advice on this one.
Page 68, it's the last comment. Financial transactions with a value greater than 10% of the rate revenue, which is approximately $7 million, isn't it? Whereas before, financial transactions in excess of $3 million triggered the significance policy. This is more than doubling, and my question is why?
Thank you. Can we just have it? I'll just confer.
Just
Jeff.
Through the chair. Look, I think Una's just making the comment that the change wasn't really intended to actually make that magnitude of change on the value, the significant dollar value. One of the questions, though, that it is actually worthwhile asking is that this significance policy actually means that we approach the question of significance from a number of angles. The old significance policy tended to be more a much more straightforward approach, and that it was really clearly articulated around set dollar values, whereas this policy is actually takes a much broader approach to the matter of what is significance. Then the question is, what is the dollar value that is of significance? So at the moment it's sitting as 10%, but Una, that I'm certain that if you had feedback on that, that would be something that could be adjusted.
So there's a risk attached to that then, is there? Apart from being double, as you've just highlighted, Councillor King.
Well, I think the issue is there's a difference between budgeted as opposed to unbudgeted expenditure. So that if you had budgeted to undertake a particular action and that budget is actually available for you to take, then that's entirely different from an action for which the budget's not available. And so what this has done is to actually effectively merge those two together into a single assessment.
So in terms
if I can perhaps respond to that, I've had concerns over the existing policy because, for example, we've had the issue with the health hub where an increase in expenditure, the excuse was given that we did not need to go out to approve that increase in expenditure, even though that increase in expenditure was over $4 million, and by my reading of the significance policy should have triggered going back out to public consultation to see whether that should have gone ahead. We're now saying under this policy that you can basically change the rules by up to $7 million and it doesn't matter. I'm sorry, that's not good enough. I would like to see this brought back to 5% would be closer to what it currently is, but it needs to clearly stipulate that if we have major deviations from either budget or that is not approved, then it must go back out to public consultation because this is public money that we are responsible for.
Yes. Perhaps unbudgeted, perhaps if it was just...
Look, I think that the issue that we have here is that the statutory consultation is triggered by this policy is extremely time consuming and also quite costly. And so there has to be a threshold that's very clear as to when that's appropriate and when it isn't. It is not unusual for projects in all councils to move quite significantly sometimes due to all sorts of factors. The question is that when does that become a matter of broad public concern to such an extent that greater consultation is actually needed? What this policy allows you, though, to do is to take it from those four dimensions on which significant is proposed to be assessed. If you reduce the threshold too far for or budgeted expenditure, then it will really drive us into a lot of consultation, which from a community perspective they may say, we've already been consulted on this matter, we've made a decision on it, it's been out in a particular plan, and now you're coming back because you've got a move on the project budget to a certain amount. Notice I'm not saying what that amount is, because that is very much up to you as to determine what you see as actually being appropriate, bearing in mind that the budgeted level of expenditure last time was a variation of more than $10 million, and for unbudgeted expenditure, let's say a new project, $3 million. So that's where we were before, and this sort of moves halfway in between a little between the two.
This is where I have the issue, because, for example, by my reading of this, and we take, for example, Shrimpak, where we did go out to public consultation over what was going to cost $6 million, and the public said no. Under this scenario, we don't have to go back out to them, even though we're going out with basically double that. And sorry, that's not wrong. That's not right. We should be going back out to public consultation. So I think we still need in there a level which is reasonable. Now, if for example, we're talking about expenditure of more than $10 million, I mean, 50% of that is highly significant because it's a 50% increase. If we're talking about a straight percentage, and this is where the danger of this straight percentage comes in, then obviously on small issues, that becomes disproportionate. But certainly on the bigger issues, there needs to be a dollar value, I think, or a set limit beyond which we have to say, no, hold it. If we're going that far, we need to go back out to consultation. I'm not comfortable with this the way it is.
Yes, well, we'll have to...
Point of order, Madam Chair. Can we just have some clarification? I'm somewhat confused. The current delegation for unbudgeted funds is at a certain level. I agree with Councillor Kenna. I think there's general agreement around the table that if there is a significant increase in unbudgeted expenditure, that the significance policy should be triggered. Because, for example, say we budgeted for $4 million, the budget came in, there was a blowout of some sort, it went to $10 million, that's $6 million unbudgeted funds. That would, in my book, that should signal significance. So, I'm happy to listen to the debate, but that's where I'm coming from. I mean, otherwise, you're just leaving it wide open for budget blowouts all the time. Because otherwise, staff could, in the bad old days, when I first got here, used to, not deliberately, but it was a trend to under cost projects. So they got up, and then you'd have a case where they all came in over budget, and you had budget blowouts. So that's why I think the Local Government Act was altered with a significance policy for unbudgeted funds. If it's budgeted at $4 million and it comes in at $2 million, I think we can handle that through the general system. But if it doubles or more, I think it's got to trigger significance. But I'll be guided.
I'd like us to debate this. So I'd like to see this one way or the other remain on the agenda to get dealt with today, please.
So if I can just try and provide some clarification and help on this, the key thing about it is that the significance policy is a guide for you effectively. It actually gives you, it sets the expectation about when you wish to put things out for reconsultation. That's the effect of the policy. With regards to this, what you've got is a roundabout a retention of about the same level as what we've got at the moment of budgeted expenditure, basically, is my reading of what the intent of this is. So in other words, if you've got a project that has been budgeted and you've got a variation coming through in excess of $10 million on that project, then effectively the guide in the significance policy would say you should consider consulting on this matter. So that's what the policy effectively is saying at the moment. If you reduce that too much, the risk that you've got is that on projects on which you've approved and have been budgeted, we've got, for example, our 3 large sewerage projects that are coming up in the next period of time. Those projects are of significant scale, and what we do know with regards to those sort of projects is that there can be quite reasonable issues encountered which do incur quite significant variations in cost. Now, the issue that you've got, of course, is that if you set the significance policy threshold too low, you will be back out into consultation on those sort of the items, which is actually a significant risk to the business operation of the organisation. Having said all of that, if you decide as a council that a variation of any magnitude is of significance due to various issues, then you can decide to take it out to consultation. That is your prerogative to do so at any point. The other point that I'd make is that the unbudgeted expenditure issue of the one that was in the original policy of $3 million was about new projects. That was not projects that are fundamentally you've approved and you've got variations on. That was effectively a new project that had not been budgeted. So that set a threshold there. Now that's no longer existing within this current area. The question for you is that it's probably not the significance with regard to expenditure that would drive you to wish to consult on new projects, but the principle of has this new project got a material impact for the community of such a degree that you should consult regardless of its cost. So that's the sort of the way that I would see this. Remember, the policy should be work for you, not be prescriptive to you to such a degree that you're driven into practices that are not right for what you believe the decision-making process should be.
Chair, can I just share with you one example, was the Energy Event Centre. The Energy Event Centre, we did the geotech, we had a budget, we had it all costed, etc., etc. Then we had a geotech report done and it came back and said there were significant issues in terms of the underground, and it was something like $4.7 million extra on top. We didn't see the significance policy should have kicked in, but we didn't have one then. But if we had one, it wouldn't have kicked in because we got that funding externally. It was already funded, so it wasn't an over expenditure to the council dollars. Okay.
I want to, Councillor Hunt, please, first.
Thank you. I'm going to second this motion. I actually think this is a really robust policy we have here. It is updated. It's essentially the staff measuring things reports that come through against this criteria. We've got community interest, we've got importance to the Rotorua district covered, consistency with existing policy and strategies, and we've got the impact on our capability and capacity. Now, that's a recommendation from staff. If we around the table think, hang on, they've missed the boat, actually I think this is more significant than the staff have recommended, then we'll speak to that. And we'll either gain support for that or we won't. But the policy itself is far better than simply a one parameter, which was how much has it cost? Because you never measure anything just on one issue. You're missing the whole point of all the developments we do if we simply focus in narrow-mindedly on one thing. And I think that when I first learnt that was at asset management, it's the non-cash attributes that you must consider as well. So it's the wider impact. This is a really good updated policy. It's pretty much what we had last time. Otherwise, it's put in a little bit more visual content and cleaned out a lot of the verbiage that was in there. But I fully support it because at the end of the day, we're the last ones that decide whether we think it's significant. If the bar's too low, we'll be over-consulting our community on issues that aren't significant, and we'll be wasting an enormous amount of money doing something that actually really at the end of the day gains us very little.
Mr. Berriman-Kemp.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Two questions that I have. Number one, page 65.3.0, under those 4 criteria for assessing significance, what I wanted to raise for the committee to consider is whether or not, in the interests of our partnership agreement, we should add a criteria in there saying importance to iwi, because that would cover off things of cultural significance and everything else, and perhaps demonstrate a partnership approach to this. However, I do acknowledge on page 73 the inclusion in this version of the Te Tātou partnership outcome partnership agreement outcomes need to be fulfilled. So I think that's good, so that's great. But I agree, I think we all agree that having at least 4 criteria for considering significance is far better than 1. But in the interest of the partnership, what I'm thinking of is whether or not importance to Te Arawa would probably make the most sense. Maybe one thing for consideration. And my second question is actually page 69, Appendix 2. I was interested to see the famously Rotorua brand as one of the strategic assets. Now, I'm quite comfortable with that, but I assume things like now the Rotorua brand and things like that, where they're more not bricks and mortar strategic assets, but they are strategically important for the council and the community, will be included.
Yes, they do need to be added. And that 5th one under the cultural, thank you for that. I think that's very, very relevant. Now, Councillor Kent, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to point out that the way it reads, it says that factors that would indicate a high level of significance. It doesn't say trigger high level significance. It says indicates high level significance. So I'm going to move an amendment that is actually changed to 5% of revenue. Because I think that's the level at which, if it's over $3.5 million, we should be considering whether it is significant enough to require to go out to consultation. That, I think, is the trigger. It is not, it has to, it's being considered to. So I move that amendment that it's approved, but with that figure adjusted to 5% if someone wishes to second that.
Well, I'm not sure that Councillor Kent can move an amendment if he's already spoken to the motion. Is that correct?
Point of order, Madam Chair, I haven't spoken to the motion. You have just moved that. I have not spoken since you've moved it.
That's correct. Yes, that's correct. The amendment is that on page 68, under the factors, that the percentage move from 5 to 10%. I just need to get some.
So the sentence would read, a financial transaction with a value of greater than 5% of rates revenue in the year of the decision, instead of what it currently reads as 10%.
The dollars there.
Well, that'd go down to about 3 then, wouldn't it?
$500,000 versus 7 million.
Mm. But if
Madam Chair, it's just a case of, in this case, it triggers, we should consider it as being significant. It doesn't say it is.
Yeah, it still has to come to the table, as Councillor Hunt indicated, no matter what level you put it at. So
Yes.
if we believe that significance has been triggered, we will make that decision.
I'll
Yeah,
take
okay.
another comment or two, and then I'm going to put that amendment. Councillor Donaldson?
Well, firstly, just addressing the amendment, Madam Chair.
Just wait a moment, please. Thank you.
Yeah.
So that amendment, that the percentage moved from 10 to 5%, and that's been moved by Councillor Kent and seconded by Councillor Stewart. So we're speaking to the amendment, are you, Councillor Donaldson?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
I tend to agree with Councillor Kent that it's either way we're going to have a debate on whether the issue or the expenditure is above a threshold where we consider it needs to go out for consultation. If it's in the vicinity of, so many millions. And we'll make that decision. If it was set at 10%, we'd still be having that debate if it came in as to is this significant or isn't it. If it was set at 3%, we would still still have the option to have that debate. So I don't see where it's sent. So I think I'm comfortable either way, actually.
Well, yes, I'm not sure if I am actually, because yes, thank you, Jeff, sorry.
So if I can just try and provide some advice to you on this. When you set a threshold on a policy, the expectation is that you are going to, in 99 times out of 100, follow that policy. And so therefore variations of around about $3.5 million on budgeted expenditure will require you to go for consultation. That's the simple matter of the effect of the policy. The issue that you have, I believe, is, and it's the debate that you need, is that if you take our large expenditure projects, it is not unusual. It would be something that we would certainly work hard to avoid, but in the size of our infrastructure projects, it wouldn't be unusual for projects particularly hit those sort of thresholds. Now, the question is, when do you want to trigger this in the policy? Do you really want to be pushing a threshold at $3.5 million? So, for example, a Rotorua project at $38 million coming in at over 41, for example. Is that the time that you want to go to statutory consultation with the community? Bearing in mind that statutory consultation is a significant activity for the organisation to undertake. Setting the threshold higher gives you the ability to still consult when you see that it is actually required. It doesn't force you into saying if the threshold is, for example, as it is at the moment, $10 million budgeted expenditure, even though you had a $4 million, $3 million budgeted change, you may determine that nevertheless, while it's below the policy threshold, you could still elect to go out for consultation on that matter. It gives you the ability to make that decision. But bringing the threshold down lowers your ability, increases the expectation that you will consult when the threshold is reached. And I think that's an important consideration as you're looking at this amendment.
Thank you. Well, we're discussing the amendment at this stage. So is there any further? Yes, Councillor Donaldson.
Yep, thank you. That was helpful, Chief Executive, because the experience of both the Rotorua sewage schemes and the Rotorua schemes is communities feel they've been consulted to death, and to have a policy that or a threshold that drives us towards further consultation is just going to bog us down and add costs to those projects. As the Chief Executive explains, we can pull that threshold down and go out for consultation at a lower level if we so see fit. But I think rather than be continually explaining to Audit New Zealand why we didn't go to consultation when our policy indicates we should have, I'd be voting against the amendment and sticking with the 10%.
Thank you. Councillor Kent, would you like to speak to your amendment?
I'd just like to point out that the current level is 3 million. Triggers the significance policy. What I'm suggesting at 5% is increasing that figure. It's not reducing it or anything like that. I personally believe that 10% is going too far. That's saying that this council can go over budget by $7 million without any reference to the ratepayers who've got to foot the bill. And sorry, I won't vote for that. I will vote against it. So it's basically a choice. It doesn't say it is significant. It says very clearly factors that indicate a high level of significance, and that is totally different. So by having it at 5%, anything over 3.5 million has to be considered as to whether it is significant or not. Not it is significant.
Thank you. Can I just get some clarity, please, Jeff? I thought our current figure was 10 million.
That's correct, Madam Chair. The current significance policy has a 10 million threshold for budgeted expenditure. The current policy differentiates between budgeted and unbudgeted expenditure. So with respects to projects that have been out for consultation, the current threshold is $10 million. So that's the current policy with regards to projects that you've approved through annual plans, LTPs and so on, which are budgeted expenditure items. Then the variation is $10 million. The $3 million pertains to effectively items or activities that have not been budgeted for, or if you like, that are new.
Thank you. I think that makes it very
Then,
clean.
Madam Chair, maybe we need to actually draw the distinction here between budgeted and unbudgeted. Maybe we should be saying 10% for budgeted expenditure and 5% for unbudgeted.
Yes.
Quite happy to move that variation.
Right, well, all right then. Perhaps we could change that, and I'm happy with that because that makes it very clear what's budgeted and what's unbudgeted. Councillor Hunt, do you want to, and we'll just see how...
I'm going to speak against that amendment. I don't know a project that we've had, and our really big ones are likely any cost increase we don't expect is a big number. This was written in 2014. 3 million bought you a lot more in 2014 than 3 million buys you today. I do not know of a project that's come to this table with a budget that's been increased that hasn't stimulated robust debate by every councillor around the table. They don't go unacknowledged. They don't just slip by as if we've overspent by 5 or 10 million there. This is something that we give serious consideration to in any project that we have. And I think that we are making it harder for ourselves, not easier. So I prefer the original, so I'm going to speak against that. If there's another amendment to the amendment, then I'll consider speaking again. But I absolutely do not support that. I think what we've got is robust. It meets all the criteria. We then, as Councillor Donaldson has said, we won't be then saying why we didn't go out to consult. We'll have a much better opportunity to say, well, actually, on this case, we're going to, because we think it's far more important. It triggers a whole bunch of criteria, and it stimulated our discussion and the communities.
Thank you. We're getting down to the wire on this one, I think. Councillor Stewart?
Yeah, I think Councillor Kent should amend his amendment so that we're on the same wavelength. But I can recall sitting here, Madam Chair, we had a blowout in the airport budget of $7.8 million, and I tried to invoke the significance policy which we had at the time, and it didn't meet the threshold. The threshold was a lot higher, or a lot lower. I'm confused now. Anyway, it wasn't triggered, where the political fallout and the backlash that this community gave us because we did not pull our horns in and say enough was enough. And that's what I'm trying to do here, in support of Councillor Kent's amendment, that a financial transaction with a value of 5% of new funding, unbudgeted funding, and 10% of budgeted funding triggers the significance policy.
Point of order, Madam Chair. I think unbudgeted goes before the word financial transaction.
Okay.
So,
Go on then.
We don't want, yes.
Rob?
Look, we're reducing
Any
the
unbudgeted
threshold from the current,
Any unbudgeted financial transaction with a value of greater than 5% of the rates revenue in that year triggers a significance. Is that what we want, Rob?
I think,
Oh, Jesus.
perhaps we should put this amendment, and, yes, thank you. I just
So
want
it's
to...
just to be clear, what this amendment achieves is a reduction in the thresholds from the current significance policy. So that's effectively what you're doing.
It's not.
Not at all.
This is unbudgeted.
We are talking unbudgeted, which is currently set at a $3 million level, and we're upping that to closer to 4.
Yeah.
But with respect to budgeted expenditure, you are reducing the threshold?
No, we're leaving it.
Yes.
We've amended that. What I've said is, can I just rephrase the whole sentence? It says here, a financial transaction with a value of greater than 10% of rates revenue for the year of decision. I would like to change that to a financial transaction with a budgeted value of greater than 10% of rates revenue, or unbudgeted value greater than 5% of rates revenue.
Yep. I'm happy with that.
Get right, and we'll get that wording right, and we're going to, I'll put that amendment, and then we'll just see how the lie of the land. We've had significant discussion on that, on this. Yes, Councillor Gould.
Madam Chair, I'd like to point out with the workshops we've had on the long-term plan, our rates revenue is just over $80 million. So your 5% is $4 million, and your 10% is $8 million.
Total income. Rates income is not 80 million. Jesus.
Just trying to get the wording right here. I think we've heard the concerns of the CEO. That for the changes, I don't. I think that's still lowering the threshold. Yeah. Can I just get this clear, Jeff? As it stands with that amendment, are we lowering the threshold for because if we are,
I think, councillors, that what you're effectively doing is you know, I think the question is that the uncertainty that's been created in the discussion is actually what do these numbers actually mean in reality, and my suggestion would be that I think we're getting confused a little, or there's some confusion around the introduction of percentages of rates revenue. And so at what dollar point do you actually wish to achieve to go out for consultation, I think is the key. What this has sort of done is morphed the old policy with the new policy, which is sort of a hybrid, if you like, of the two now.
well, look, Councillor, the last question, thank you, and then I'm going to put that...
I just wonder, Madam Chair, to get us through this, if the mover and seconder would like to change the percentage to 10 million and 5 million.
No. Well, we've just worked out that the wording on the amendment, and I'm quite happy with the mover in this.
But we're currently at 10 and 3, aren't we? 10 and 3. Well, I mean, as long as the figure says 10% of budgeted or $10 million worth of budgeted expenditure and above $3 million of unbudgeted expenditure, which retains it where we currently are and makes it very clear.
Look, I don't believe we've got, though, remember the current policy is $10 million. We haven't got over $100 million of rates revenue. And so effectively that top number is actually being pulled back, and I suspect the bottom number
Our total turnover is 101 million. Rates revenue is not that. Rates revenue is only about 80 million.
That's right. So effectively the 10% of the 80 is resulting in the $10 million, and there's the 10 and 3 threshold. So the 10 comes back to 7, 8, and the 3 comes up slightly to 4.
So why don't we just make it 10 and 4? 10 and 4 million and forget the percentages. I think that's the simplest.
Is this going to then trigger more occasions when we will be going out to consult? Is this going to trigger more of the? Because this is what you've been saying. It could delay and hold us up in going out again to consult if there's a no, if there's a, and that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Madam Chair, my apologies. So I think there needs to be a little bit of changes on the proposal at the moment, so that you're going from a percentage of rates revenue to a set dollar amount, which means that I think the way this is worded now is somewhat misleading. But effectively what you're doing is you're staying within the limits of the current policy. That's really what you're doing by making this amendment.
Does the current policy serve us well? Okay. Okay, so we're putting dollars in now. Perhaps if we had to put the dollars in the first place rather than the percentage.
Yes, we're taking that out.
Yeah. Sorry, yes, Your Worship.
Could I just ask the Chief Executive, what is the cost when we trigger the significance policy? What's the cost of engagement? We're just talking.
Yes.
Make it all work. It makes no sense whatsoever. It comes back here, but significance policy also has to go out to the community.
Yes, but the CEO.
Could I ask the CEO for that answer, really?
Well, the CEO, actually, Your Worship, has highlighted on more than one occasion in this debate, yes, the time and etc. And it's significant going out again or going out. So, all right. So let's have a look, and as long as we're not being. Think about it.
No, you don't have to put the other one.
This one goes through. All right, thank you. Well, look, I think we've had some good discussion on that. It's been moved by Councillor. Now, this is an amendment. So it's been moved by Councillor Stewart, it's been moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Stewart, that a financial transaction that involves $10 million or more budgeted expenditure, or it involves $4 million or more unbudgeted capital expenditure. God, I better get the words right. No.
Just expenditure.
Recommends. Oh, sorry. That's it. All right. Well, it's been moved and seconded, so I'll now put that motion. All those in favour of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Thank you.
So do we renew this?
Yes, Councillor Donaldson.
Just a question, Madam Chair, on the Appendix 2, Strategic Assets, the issue that I just want to be reassured on this point, the issue raised by Mr. Betterman Camp, the Rotorua brand. Do we own that? Is that ours? Because I'm not sure that it is. The corridor that's gone on before, is it Te Tato's brand or is it Council's strategic asset? We need to be careful there given the previous corridor that's gone on here today.
Can be, yes, have to go back and find that out. Fine, thank you. So I don't require to put any other on this one. That's for that. That's it for that amendment. Yes, so that is carried. Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
We've been debating that for a long time. What? Huh? Yeah. We've got more costs coming.
Thank you. Recommendation 6. And look, thank you for that discussion. I'm sorry it did take a while to get there, but it is important, particularly with that, I have to say, and the big projects that we all know we've got on our agenda. Recommendation 6, classification of reserve pursuant to Reserves Act 1977, and that's Towie Street. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please, to receive that report? Thank you, Councillor Bentley. Seconded, Councillor Hunt. Thank you. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Contrary, no.
I'm happy to
Good afternoon, Stavros.
I'm happy to move to, Madam Chair.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Kent has moved to us at the same time. Thank you, Councillor Bentley. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Stavros.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This report came to the Council earlier and I will take it as read. We only know this is a technicality where we are seeking Council's approval to reclassify what has been agreed earlier from a road reserve under the Parks Act in 1928 to a Reserves Act in 1977 to allow us to action the transition. So happy to take any questions on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mohi?
Through you, Madam Chair, kia ora, Stavros. I understand that this has been across this table before, but I wasn't a member at that time. So I just have one question. Was there any discussion or engagement or consultation or just a notice saying how you're going to have a walkway behind your house to the residents?
I understand the conversation with the local residents has taken place as part and parcel of a sideway development program. The transaction for the land, it's been discussed between Port, and the council as a practical scenario. But the whole connection of the way to the Nongotaha Reserve has been consulted with people, as I understand.
All right. I guess I'm referring to the dwelling itself. Yeah.
I believe so.
Okay. Yep, that's all. Thank you.
It did happen. Councillor Janet Wepper was involved at that time with the community groups.
I just want it noted that I won't take part in the vote, but I can assure Ms. Mohi that all those actions have been undertaken.
And thank you, Your Worship, you're quite right. I know that Councillor Wepper was very particular about ensuring that the community was informed and consulted and gave feedback, etc. So yes, thank you. So no further questions, so it has been moved and seconded. Moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Bentley, that the committee recommends to Council that Part 32A, is that the correct one? Yes, 32A, Towie Street, Rotorua Reserves, subject to the Public Reserves, Domains and National Parks Act 1928, be clarified as local purpose road reserve pursuant to the Reserves Act 1977. It's been moved and seconded. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, aye. Thank you. Carried. Thank you. It's noted. Thank you. So noted, Councillor Stewart. I would like to ask for a mover and a seconder, please, that we continue. We've been in session for longer than it's now 6 hours, and we need to have a mover and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Thank you, Councillor Tapsell. So I'll put that, I do need to put that. So it's been moved and seconded that the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meeting of the 7th of December continue. So I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you. Thank you. So we are getting there, councillors. We are getting there. Recommendation 7.
I move.
Thank you, Your Worship. That the report, Strategic Direction Supporting Youth Employment, be received. I'd like a mover and a seconder, please, to receive that report. Thank you. It's been moved by Her Worship and seconded by Councillor Gall. I'll put that motion. All those in favour of the report being received, please say aye. Contrary, thank you. Carried. Good afternoon, Rosemary.
Good afternoon, councillors. So this report is really highlighting a strategic direction for the people portfolio in relation to youth employment. So I'll take it as read, but just go over a couple of the key points with you. So the people portfolio framework is a work in motion, so it's in your papers, but it's adjusting to things as they come along. And this work really relates to both the sustainable living portfolio and resilient communities, a number of the Rotorua 2030 goals around economic development, around resilient communities and around employment, and the sustainable living strategy around resilient communities. So it also fits with the people portfolio for the same reasons. So the idea is that we look at the things we've been doing, often in isolation, a number of the things we do to support young people's development, but look at how we then act more in partnership with some others around some particular opportunities for youth employment. And there's some of the ideas around some of the gaps and what has been happening, and where we have young people, for instance, starting to, there's some good statistics around achievement at NCA level 2, that's definitely improving, but we've still got youth unemployment figures which aren't really moving. And we think that some of the gaps around this, perhaps around the area of the skills and the linkage between training and education and employment, that there's a bit of a gap in the area around the skills and that connection. And we've also heard from the Chamber of Commerce previously that they often have difficulties getting people with the right skills to actually be able to employ. So the idea is to look at some opportunities to work in partnership and work up some details of what some of those gaps are and how we might work with a number of community partners to develop up that work. So this paper is really just highlighting that strategic area that we think is somewhere that council can be really effective in the community for your information and your support for further development of projects.
Thank you very much, Rosemary. Look, I do need to speak to this because I am the lead of the people portfolio. And the issues around youth employment are significant, and we know that. And so we do have to put all emphasis on working collaboratively with everyone who has an interest in ensuring that our young people are either in employment or working in employment or training, because we can't park them up on the sideline and hope and somehow things are going to change for them. We have a definite role. It's not our job to do everything, neither can we do everything, but it certainly is our role to set the environment where everybody can feel they can contribute something. So I certainly do support the work that we intend to do in this space. And I would ask you also, particularly those with your own portfolios, to look to see what else that you might be able to contribute in this space. Our young people, we talk about them being our future, then you don't leave them parked on the sideline. And that is indeed what has happened, not only in Rotorua, but all around the country. And we neglect our youth at our peril. I can say that. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wholly endorse this direction, and I would like to draw Councillors' attention, if they aren't aware of it, to Rotorua, which implemented a policy of actively getting young kids cadetships or apprenticeships within the town by approaching all the local businesses, the net effect of which is they have no youth unemployment in the town anymore. So anything in that direction is positive.
Thank you. Yes, Your Worship.
Councillor Kent's right, that's called the Men's Task Force for Jobs, but it was actually, it is an initiative
they're all playing up, your version.
Okay, it's an initiative that failed to get Crown funding, and so in the last 3 years has really fallen into abeyance, and the only outcome that was successful was the youth driver licence, that we get a universal youth driver licence program underway in this term of government at school. This actually is long awaited. You're absolutely right, and but we need resourcing, and we failed to get resourcing from the previous administration for anything for the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs. And then there was the Bay of Connections plan, and there was a little bit of youth transitions funding in there, 70,000, and we haven't really had our slice of that either. So this is a new approach. It ties all the threads together. It's been long awaited from the people portfolio. It's great to see it come here today. And next week down in Wellington with the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs, we're bringing up other community-led programs, and this youth program is the sort of program that we are seeking support. So that will take a while to weave that through, but it's perfectly poised.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. It was disappointing that the last government failed to recognise, well, I think they did recognise it, and they should have funded it so it could be rolled out right throughout the country. And so, when you, as I say, that's some years of waste of human potential. And sometimes young people get despondent, and sadly, sometimes we do see some tragic results. Is there any further? Yes, thank you, Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make a comment if we're finished with questions.
Finished with questions, thank you.
Cool, thank you. Really, actually, well, firstly, just my disappointment that it's actually taken this long to get to this point. It was so early on in last term that we disestablished the Youth Council with a promise to them that we will bring something else out. So, while I'm happy that this is here, I just must share my disappointment at that, and the fact that we still do not, within this council, have enough or a specific FTE position to be looking after this. And I only say that because of the importance of this issue. Now, you all know that youth and families are very important to me, which is why I am glad that we've got this, but we need strategy before we have delivery, and I believe that this proposed strategy is focused too much on delivery and on individual projects instead of strategy itself. So I hope that that can be very quickly developed alongside other community groups that you'll be talking to, as you mentioned, planned and sustained collaborative approach. And I am concerned, so perhaps if that, I guess that's a question, just on page 91 in the financial budget considerations, that initially this work consists of business as usual strategic activity. We've been going about as business as usual, and that's why it's taken so long to get to this point. Now, if this is such an important issue to us of youth employment, we do need to have more of an FTE assigned to this to make sure that we have that time. And I do feel for Rosemary and the other staff, because I know that they have been immensely under the grind with a lot of the work we're doing. And I do congratulate Rosemary on getting Michael Nolan here from the United Nations to have a workshop with our young intermediate students who absolutely love that. So there is excellent work going, but please, if we could have more of a strategic approach instead of looking at delivery of specific projects. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I am aware of the work that's been going on in all the other areas as well. Thank you. Well, look, I am going to put that. I'm going to put the motion, the second recommendation. Any other? No. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rosemary. That the committee recommends to council to endorse the strategic direction for supporting youth employment. May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Trumper. Thank you, Councillor Gord. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you. Carried. Thank you. May I have a mover and a seconder, please, for us to exclude the public. Now, we do have all right, thank you. there are 3 items to be considered in the public excluded session, and the reasons for these 3 to be excluded from the public is to maintain the professional privilege, to enable any local authority holding the information to carry on without prejudice or disadvantage, protect information where the making available of the information would be likely unreasonable or to prejudice the commercial position of the person involved. So I'd call for a mover and a seconder, please, for the motion. Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. It's been moved and second that we go into public excluded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary.